Okay, good evening, everybody. Before we get going, we're going to do the Pledge of Allegiance. Everybody please stand. Pledge allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I have no announcements tonight, but what I would like to do is have a motion to adopt an agenda. Naomi's first. Bob is second. All in favor? Aye. Okay, motion passes. Okay, before we go, I'm going to have the students come up first. Before we do our comments. Okay.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Kellen Gunner. I am a Board of Education representative from the SFA Senate. I don't have too much to talk about tonight. One thing I do want to focus on is our Dodgeball Tournament. It's been held annually except for last year. We got an invitation.
What, are we helping?
Yeah, we're sending an invitation.
Wait, we're allowed to participate?
Wait, are we a team or are we watching?
We are a team.
Would you like to be a team?
Yes!
Let's do it. All right, we'll do it.
We're gonna play against
Yeah,
our
exactly.
kids.
Okay, we'll get it done. You guys want it?
Oh dear, I don't know what we just committed to. But
You're fine.
All right. So, anyways, it's being held March 4th, and it's going to be a lot of fun. I know students are really excited to get back into the swing of things. I mean, we don't even have our posters up in the hallways yet, and I hear kids talking about getting a team together, which it's just been so awesome to see the sense of community that's sort of been forming in Senate. That's really all I have to talk about tonight. I'm going to turn it over to our president, Trinity Sanders. She's got something to say.
Alrighty, thank you so much for having me this evening. Again, I'm Trinity Sanders. I'm your SFA Senate President for this year. I'm also a senior this year. And of course, the President usually for Senate likes to peek in every now and then to a Board of Education meeting. So I also was a Board of Education rep during my junior year. So I was here virtually with you all. And I have came to one Board of Education meeting in person last year. So this is, of course, not 100% just abnormal to me, but I did want to touch on a couple of things. Thank you so much, Kellen, for touching on our Dodgeball Tournament. We have a prep show coming up. We have a video game tournament coming up. We also have, I think we have, we're focusing a lot on advertising when it comes to the Senate this year, as well as in getting more students involved, as the election process is a little bit changing due to current circumstances with COVID, as everything else is changing as well. So thank you so much for being a part of that. I don't plan to speak very long, but I did want to address one thing. Last year, when I did come with the rest of my officer team, I was reminded of a time when I had, right before the meeting, a small panic attack. And it was because I was CDL for an entire year, even though I was with you all virtually and I was Board of Education rep. Being here with a bunch of people was almost overwhelming, to the point where when I gave my presidential first speech to the board, I was filled with a lot of nervousness, a lot of uneasiness, because I haven't been around that many people in that long, because I was a CDL student. And looking back at that moment, I'm very thankful for that moment, because when I left, I called my father and I'm like, I was so nervous when I gave my first speech. I've been CDL for so long, I haven't been around this many people. There's a bunch of people in the back, there's a bunch of people all over in the hall. I haven't seen this many people ever since COVID started, and it's been over a year. And he said, you needed that moment. And I know a lot of times Gen Z likes to joke about character development, but that was a character development moment for me, and it was needed. Even though now I'm back at school and I've been wearing masks all year long and I've been able to interact with people, it was the times when before I wasn't able to interact with people, I was able to grow from experiences, and knowing that even though I was back at home, I was able to still come here to the board, still feel welcome, and still and able to go to school right now and stay safe because of that sacrifice that we made during COVID. To allow students to go CBL, to allow students to be hired. It was the sacrifices that we made back then that did affect me, it affected many other students, that allowed us to be here today and stand and go to school. It allowed Senate to come together in person to have our meetings after school. It allowed students to go home on late buses. It allowed students to stay safe in every single classroom. So I want to thank the board for that. I want to thank every administrator who's put forth the necessary work to make sure that we all stay safe as you guys all continue to help us out in every single way. So thank you so much, and I wish you all the best for the rest of the year.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks,
Trinity.
Trinity.
Don't forget us.
I will send you.
Right.
Wait a second.
Naomi, you're in.
I know.
It's all good.
This is terrifying.
All right, so let's go through the board comments. I'm going to start with Olivia. Olivia, do you have anything you want to add tonight?
Nothing really. I mean, in case I don't feel better, I ran here from musical rehearsal for Mamma Mia. That was going until 7, so I left early, but things are going really well. And all I know is that people are really happy to be back. And as Trinity said, everyone's happy to be meeting back with their interests and their common goals. And I think school experience has just increased so much. So that's all I have.
Olivia, when is the show?
Ooh, great question. I think March 18th through 20th, but you should all come see it. We're working really hard. And it's Mamma Mia, and who doesn't like Mamma Mia? So.
Yeah.
Great, thank you, Olivia. Stacy?
I'll say something, kind of what Trinity's comments kind of segue into what I was thinking about, and that was how our emphasis this whole time has been on keeping kids safe. And what I think we mostly mean by that is keeping kids free of COVID. And I think maybe we haven't put enough emphasis on some of the mental and emotional things that children are going through now too as a result of these restrictions. And so I just think, I know for parents that are watching kids become anxious, withdrawn, depressed, it can be scary. And I think it's important that when we talk about safety, as a board, we need to emphasize that we need mental safety as well as physical safety.
Great. Great. Thank you, Stacy. Gusta?
It's a running theme. I want to comment on last week's district partnership meeting. So I wrote a little something because I can't speak from the top of my head. It was going to be a Shen shout out, but it's not. I sat in on the district partnership meeting last week. I was extremely impressed and excited by all the activities the different partnership teams are doing in and around the district, from book clubs to the upkeep of the pond behind Carragon, to student voice projects, raising money for Ronald McDonald House, and podcasts, just to name a few. After I got off the meet, I thought about all the positives I was able to take in from the leaders in the district, and what I came away with was this. This is what inclusiveness looks like. This is what being connected is. Nobody denies that COVID has been detrimental to our students and continues to be. There's been extensive research on pre and current mental health on school-age children. But one of the ways to move through this, in addition to the extensive mental health services we offer our students, is to offer other opportunities to be involved and to feel a part of something. It's clear that one of the big factors in the deterioration of the mental health in a young person is isolation. It's apparent to me that the administration and educators recognize this and are working so hard to bring the kids together. The past 2 years have been so tough. I came away from partnership really encouraged. It was a great meeting.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's good. I can feel your energy over here.
It was so good.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Naomi?
Yes, thank you both. I think those are very important messages that everyone should hear. What I want to say about the podcast is that you really should check this one out. It highlights, it really showcases our programs that are not necessarily ones that people think of, because Shen is really seen of as like a prep. There's a lot of emphasis on prepping for college. So it showcases our construction programs, our BOCES programs, our culinary arts programs. It's really well done. Check that one out. So thank you for bringing that up. The only thing I want to add is that I'm looking forward to Thursday's inaugural Technology Honor Society. That's a brand new one. I want to thank Mrs. Barra for being the advisor for that program. I'm looking forward to meeting the new officers and also celebrating our inaugurees. And I'm looking forward to our conference day tomorrow and the lobby day, which is next Wednesday. And that's all I have for today. Thank you.
Jason?
I didn't come prepared with a lot to say, but glad to hear from my other board members, yeah.
Yeah. Todd?
No, pass for now.
Okay. Bob?
Yeah, a couple things. I appreciate the comments ahead of me from my other board members. I would like to focus on what we're going to be doing in February, both this meeting and the following meeting, which is 2 weeks from today. We're really going to get into the budget. We had a great presentation last time on what's unique about this year. Okay, what's unique about this year relative to others, and I think everybody in the community needs to understand that. You have a governor with a very refreshing attitude to spend on education. And it's showing, and it showed in the presentation we had 2 weeks ago. We haven't had that for many years. Often I would describe it as pecuniary, meaning very tight on the money, finding ways to use money in other places within the state, finding ways not to fully source foundation aid. We have a plan for that. But also just other small things that when you add them up will make it a more effective educational program, make more effective programs within the state. We also have a lot more federal money to spend. But in previous years, the other thing we do is you have to look at the money that comes in from taxes, the things that we always have to pay for as well as to pay more for. We're in a great position with money to really think about what we want to do the next few years. It's great to see that these are coming forward in actions and what people talk about, district partnership, but there's also going to be some really deeper topics coming forward. The one that really struck me was you're finally seeing some statements on electric buses. In the past, the best we had was some piloting. There is one district in the capital region that is piloting, I've been told. I've not seen how that's worked out. But there are dates being thrown out by the governor's office as by 2025, you should be buying electric buses, okay? By, I think, 2030 or a couple years later, you should have all your buses be electric, okay? So we're getting these mandates, and one thing we have to realize, okay, mandates, people in our government, whether they be state or federal, can tell us. They're legally allowed to tell us to do certain things. What we have to be consistent in pointing out to them is if you don't fund us, if it's an unfunded mandate, it's really not going to work. So we have to be careful. I'm excited that this puts us in a time and a place where we can evaluate where to go forward with potentially visiting the other district, but also be careful on where we spend our money, what we pilot on, how do we start something. When you look at all the fact we had every student with a laptop pretty much through COVID, okay, that didn't happen by accident. That happened because of a technology plan. We talked about laptops for students. We rolled it out with a limited number of laptops, and we quickly brought every student on board with a laptop when we truly needed it. I feel the same way about buses. This is a start of where that's going to go. I also feel there's other things we can look at in terms of geothermal capability. That we have some great examples here near us. But there are ways to get smart about how we spend money, but we also want to listen to our experts on where that goes. So thank you very much. I look forward to talking about that as well as the goals. There's those the actions. Those are the things we're really signing up to. What are people going to do? Money's part of the equation. Obviously it's important because you got to spend on things. But you also have to talk about what have you done versus what you were asked to do at the end of the summer. So that gets reviewed at our mid-year goals review. I look forward to that because that kind of brings this whole month together for us. What are we spending on for the future? What have we done? And where do we really need to service the true need going forward? Some great discussions are coming forward. I hope they continue. And we end the month really understanding what the needs are and how we're going to service them. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. Okay, so what I've been doing the last couple of meetings is, spanning, and I've started to every week do a board wrap to my colleagues in an email as well. So a lot of the conversation back and forth in email this week, calls and texts, again, surrounded about masking on both sides. People that, support the policies we have in place and others that do not. So we vetted many emails this week, both Dr. Robinson and myself. I put my phone number out there several times, and surprisingly, no calls back. No calls back. So just, that's my report really this week, that's what we've been dealing with. So from there, I'm going to go into public comment. I'm going to read and I'm going to expound upon that tonight. This is an opportunity for residents to address the Board of Education. The board reminds residents that the public comment portion of our meeting is only one item in a long agenda. We therefore ask that each speaker be as succinct as possible and that remarks be limited to 2 to 3 minutes. We would also expect that residents speak in a respectful and courteous manner so as to model proper civility and decorum for our students. Comments or questions regarding a specific staff member or student are confidential and will not be allowed or addressed by the board. District residents may also send questions, comments via boe@shenschools.org. All questions, comments come into the Office of Public Information Officer and are shared with the board and superintendent. Policy questions, concerns are typically addressed by the board president. Operational questions, concerns are typically addressed by the superintendent and/or designee. When you come up, please provide your name and your address. There's a few other things that I'm going to speak to tonight. And, you know, I appreciate everybody's opinion. I mean, everybody has an opinion, and I respect that. Just so everybody is aware, too, that some people feel that, you know, the reason for being here, this is a meeting of the board in public. You're at the leisure to provide public comment in such a manner, but this is a meeting of the board in public. So I'm going to set a few extra guardrails tonight on behalf of myself and my board colleagues. When you come up, we will tolerate absolutely proper decorum and respect. We will not tolerate name calling, discriminating comments, berating comments, yelling, swearing, or any threats of any kind. If that does occur up here at the podium, I will ask you to please stop. If you do not stop, I've already asked my friend Eric in the back to escort you back to the audience. So I would appreciate, again, proper decorum and respect for all of us in this room tonight and people watching on live. Okay, with that, we'll start public comment.
My name is Chris Fitzgerald, and I live at 17 Fairwood Lane, Park. I've been to a couple of Board of Education meetings, just 2 over the last year. And at the last one, Deanna spoke about, she started the meeting by talking about engagement. And she's right. Engagement is the basis for success, or she was talking about how important engagement is. And she's right. It's the basis for success in every aspect of our life. Our schools, work, health, relationships, and most importantly, our democracy. But many of us are so busy that we aren't always as engaged as we could or should be. Besides that, we assume that our governing organizations are doing what's best, and we don't really notice the impact of their decisions until it affects us or our families directly. Which is why most of us are here tonight. I kind of expected a bigger crowd, but anyway. The issue of masking and how it's affecting our children, because I know that's a big thing. So I could stand here and cite a bunch of statistics and try to get people to see my perspective, but those who disagree won't care to listen. COVID-19 should have united us the same way 9/11 did. Instead, the media, politicians, and big tech have made the response to it political and divisive. They tell us that political party determines whether you're for or against masks, vaccine, the greater good, the list goes on. Yet there are a million personal reasons why each of us holds the views that we do. And as Americans, each of us should have the freedom to choose what is best for us and our families and respect the decisions of others, the decisions others make in taking care of their own. Yet our interactions have become so disrespectful. Opinions have taken the place of facts, drowning out another's voice, or canceling a relationship because we disagree has become common. It's also completely sad and antithetical to the values that we used to hold in this country. Being able to speak freely, ask questions, and have meaningful discourse is one of the most profound ways we can make a difference. It's the cornerstone of our democracy and why our forefathers put freedom of speech first in the Bill of Rights. Our democracy and rule of law is what makes this country so special. But in my opinion, our governor and our health commissioner now are trying to circumvent our laws by amending language in Section 260 that would essentially give them the power to impose mandatory masks at their will. Recently, a New York State Supreme Court judge struck down Governor Hochul's directives as unconstitutional. The judge's ruling made it clear: nowhere in public health law is the commissioner bestowed with the authority to make law. While the commissioner may enact rules that appear to have the full force, effect, and weight of law, those rules must be tailored, necessarily related, and attached to a law that the state legislature has passed. Yet Governor Hochul and DOH officials assert that the guidance used requiring schools to make schools require students and teachers to wear masks would remain in effect indefinitely, even if the rule directed at businesses and public spaces is revoked. While I understand they were granted a stay, I do not understand why we don't stand up to the governor's guidance in her blatant attempt to circumvent the law. Clearly, our county health officials don't believe that these policies are effective enough to implement them. And Dr. Robinson, even you yourself last week said at the last board meeting that many of the COVID policies that they're trying to implement just don't make sense. These policies are not just about masks, they're about our bodily autonomy and the freedom to choose what is best for us and our families. If we continue to give the government more authority, these policies will only continue to expand as our personal freedoms constrict. And while you may agree with it now, there will probably come a point at some time in the future that you don't. And by then it will be too late. Change can start in this room. We may not always agree, but we probably share more common ground than we think. No matter what side of the argument you are on, I am quite certain that we all want the same thing. For our friends and family to be safe, and for this damn pandemic to end. Thank you.
My name is Justin Goggins. I also live at 17 Thoroughbred Way. So, my entire generation and those preceding will inherit a world with less freedom if we don't stand up to the policies that are being implemented right now. This school board has the ability to shape some of those policies, and if you don't stand up for us, who will? We know that these cloth masks are largely ineffective at stopping the transmission of COVID. The CDC has even admitted that. We know that we retain more CO2 due to wearing them, making us more tired, irritable, less attentive, and less able to focus and learn. Younger kids have an even greater challenge because so much of their learning and socialization is derived from facial cues and expression. Shen's motto is to strive for excellence, but how can we excel if masks that we have been wearing for 2 years impact our ability to learn and grow? Most of the men and women in this room have enjoyed a life full of freedom. So to you, this small span of time wearing masks doesn't seem significant. But think about this. A third grader has been masked for 1/4 of his or her life, a first grader for 1/3, and a 4-year-old for half of his or her little life. Even many of the media outlets, such as the Atlantic, the New York Times, and the Washington Post, that have long supported masking, are now reporting the detrimental effects that it has had on us. I don't want to wear a mask for the rest of my life. I don't want to give up the freedom to live the way I want, the same way that we lived before March of 2020. The spread of the virus is inevitable, but we also know how minimal the actual symptoms are on the overwhelming majority of the country's citizens. So why, after 2 years, are we not treating this virus like the cold or the flu and getting back to living normal lives? There's absolutely no reason that these COVID policies should still be in place, and the fact that they are should raise more red flags than there currently are among the people. I can see how our freedom has been impacted by COVID, and as an American citizen, and one who can now vote, I believe it is time to make a change. You, the school board, have the power to start making changes that will benefit all of us. I just hope that you will act in our best interests.
Anybody else?
Hello there, my name is Ben Reelman, I live at 4 Woodside Drive.
Sir, can you just put, Dr. Robinson and I sit right here. Can you put your mask on, please, while you're talking? Thanks, I appreciate it.
Why is that?
Because everybody needs to be masked in this room, and I'm asking you to do it. If not, then I can move back if you don't want to.
Yeah, would you mind? Thank you, it obstructs my speaking. So I don't really have much to say. I really want to applaud the young men who came up here, the young men and women that came up here to voice your opinion. It's not always easy to stand up and speak about what you believe in, and also the school board member who mentioned the mental health aspect. I think that's a very important thing that we don't always talk about. It's not highlighted as much. You know, there's so much emphasis on, oh, we have to social distance and wear masks, but, and, oh, you know, maybe these measures have done X or done Y, but we don't actually see, well, what's the mental health cost? You know, I have a young son and a young daughter, and to the young gentleman's point who just spoke, you know, most of my son's life in school, or I mean, not most of his life, but a good portion of his life has been spent masked up, and I mean, I can't help but think that that's going to have a negative impact. And I think that you probably all agree, anybody honest with themselves is going to admit that that's not going to have a positive impact. But two things I just wanted to talk about is that just disappoints me over the last 2 years. And one is that when I was raised that something that a person should do is admit when they're wrong. And I've seen over the last 2 years people get things wrong, and that's okay. You know, we all make mistakes. I make mistakes. Nobody's perfect, but it just seems like there's no one that's accountable. Nobody wants to admit that we made a mistake. And the fact is, I mean, you can make all the claims you want that, you know, these masks save lives, but the fact is you have no way of knowing that. There's no control group out there that you can just say, oh yeah, look, we saved X more lives than this other group. So you can say that all day, but it doesn't make it true. And I think if we let this pandemic just kind of run its course, we probably would have seen a lot fewer lives. Now, I don't know that to be true either, but I have just as much confidence in that statement as anybody who says that we saved lives doing what we're doing. So it goes back to just, maybe we should just admit that we were wrong. It's okay. Like, people forgive you. You don't always have to get everything right. You say to yourself, all right, well, we messed up. We're damaging our youth. And for what? For what? We know it affects old people, it affects the elderly, it affects people who are infirm, who have comorbidities, right? It's less deadly for kids than the flu. We never changed our way of life with the flu. Why are we doing it now? Why are we continuing to do it? That's the part that really just, at my core, I just can't understand. And the other point that I just want to make and I'll finish it up, is just, you know, the closest elected officials to the people are school board members, and I know it's not a good position to be in where you're like, oh, I've got the state telling me one thing and I've got the community, you know, largely split. You know, I know some people feel one way or the other, but, you know, at the end of the day, you have to have some sense about you, and you got into this position for a reason. You want to do good, you want to take care of schools and make sure the future is a positive one. So, I mean, I just hope that there's a little bit of sense about, like, well, A, maybe we got things a little bit wrong. B, maybe it's time to say enough's enough. And C, it's like, you know, some people say, I don't want to die on this hill. Well, you know, you guys work in education. What else is worth fighting for? Young kids, their future. their psychology, the people that they're gonna be in the future. Like 10 years from now, we're gonna have a lot of things that are gonna come about as a result of this, and it's like, you guys have the opportunity to stop it now. I wish we stopped it a year ago, but again, nobody's perfect. We can't change the past, but we can set forth a better future. So I just want to wish everybody well, and God bless you all. Have a good night.
Good evening, my name is Jamie Clark, and I won't be divulging my address. I am a resident. I'll sign it on a piece of paper if you need to. Because these days, with the divisiveness that was brought up by the first speaker, we get sought out, both for our professions, whether they're a teacher in this school district or any other school district, or a staff member or a board member, anybody that has an opinion against masks or some of these mandates and the restrictions that we've continued for ad nauseum with no benefit, we get attacked. Personally, at our homes, there's people that have had numbers of things occur on their properties, so I won't be telling you my address. I have 4 children. One just graduated, class of 21 from Burnt Hills, one's a sophomore at Burnt Hills, and 2 boys here at Shenendehowa Elementary. Ironically, this morning we get the Shenendehowa email that February is what? Kindness Month? Last week, I chose to allow my boys at Shen Elementary the option to wear their mask or not, because that was our legal right. Regardless of what the email said, which were misleading and complete misinformation, we want to talk about misinformation campaigns, that was a misleading, legally incorrect document. My boys chose to go to school without a mask that day, on Tuesday. The happiest they've been to go to school in 2 years. Like Ben said, my son is my youngest son is a first grader. He's never had a normal school year because of these mandates. We all gave to the first beginning of the pandemic, March throughout that school year. And then we all started to realize that the decisions that were being made were incorrect for our children, for all of our children. To take away the options as parents to protect our children, to understand and address our own risk averseness or our risk tolerances was completely wrong, and has perpetuated a lot of the problems that have been brought up. We talk about social-emotional learning. We've done the complete opposite for over 2 years. We can support them with CDL and things like that, but that is not the same as having personal interactions, especially as you get younger in the age groups. So my youngest son, my first grader, on Tuesday, was actually because his principal and his teachers were aware of mine and my ex-wife's decisions to allow them to go mask-free. Upon getting into the cafeteria, they were then forced to put on a mask by somebody, a school official in that school. But then once they got into their classroom, they were both allowed to be mask-free for the entire day. One thing that many of the parents that are on the pro-mask side or mask mandate side do not understand is that your elementary children, at least at Shenendehowa and the vast majority of other local schools, do not get mask breaks. We got an email with this Omicron wave from the school nurse saying, because of Omicron, now your children also will not get an AM snack, so make sure you feed them enough food to survive until 11:30 for lunch. These children, in order to get on the bus, have to have their breakfast at 6:30 in the morning. So you have youngsters that need sustenance, need food, in order to stay alert for 5 hours. And that was taken away from them also. That morning snack break was their only guaranteed mask break. That was taken away by this school. So I was quite angry at that revelation. Our email today about kindness month at Shen, my first grader, one of the first classmates that was 3 feet in a desk next to him, a young girl. Now you want to talk about indoctrination? This young girl asked my son, "Where is your mask? Are you trying to kill people?" That was why when he got home, They were still happy. They got to enjoy their school. Teachers were thrilled to see a smiling face. They were thrilled. They were getting comments from many of the teachers that they saw in the hallways. They weren't luckily segregated like other districts that I have to deal with. But they were then, my first grader was asked if he was trying to kill somebody. So that's the kind of mentality, and that's the kind of divisiveness that's coming not just from the anti-maskers, that's what's coming from the other side. It has been so polarized and supported by many of these board members sitting here today, because I've had email discussions and I've had actual interactions in other board meetings that I've attended and spoken to, and listening to and watching the facial responses on the eyes because I can't see your face. A first grader asked another classmate if he was trying to kill people. Kindness month? Let's see what happens to the kindness attitude if God, hopefully Hochul decides to release the reins of tyranny that she's imposed on us all. If she does that on Valentine's Day, what are the kids going to do? Are we going to, as a school, fall back on our mitigation plan that currently, by the current science, is completely bupkis? It has no foundation in science or practicality any longer. We don't contact trace. We don't do much quarantining. Everything, all the data that you see on the County Department of Health website is based on PCR tests only that come out of the hospitals, or PCR tests if they're done at a school district, or the rapid home test. So every single positive case that you see that shows all of these tier mitigation levels based on community spread are completely erroneous. They're not based in any kind of science. The denominator, total number of tests, is not accurate. The only thing you're getting now are positives. If you get those positives from the honest parents that are, okay, well, he's not symptomatic, so I gotta go to work. He's gonna go to school anyways. So if we want to be honest with ourselves, to Ben's point earlier, it's time to say I'm sorry. It's time to say I'm sorry for taking away your children's last 2 years of a life's experience. Yeah. It's time to say I'm sorry for taking away your choices. I am not anti-mask. I don't believe they work. I'm not anti-vaccine. I know it doesn't work. Every single person in this room, I can guarantee you, leaves a school district and goes on their vacation, goes out to the beach, goes to some restaurant. We have our politicians, both state and federal level, that go out and we hate Florida because they're all against all these mandates. Who do you see bouncing around the beach and in the bars? Our elected New York State officials. Governor Newsom, enjoying the NFC championship, mask-free next to Magic Johnson. We have people in this room that I know for a fact have been outside of this school district. Teachers, when the kids are stuck without even a little mask break or a morning snack, they go to the break room and they take their mask off for their other teacher friends. Every teacher that sits there and thinks and says that they're demanding, and I know the pressure's on you guys, the teachers union is actually trying to push for mandates to support the mask mandates, all while their teachers get to go sit in a break room and get a breath of fresh air, while our kids don't. I'm angry, again, still. I'm not angry at you, I'm angry with our adult response to this. I'm angry at losing the choices that we are all guaranteed. I'm angry at some of the email responses I get from the board, or lack of responses. So I suggest, and I'm going to put this in writing, and there will be a petition, that we're going to demand an open forum review and revision to the mitigation plan, if that's going to be Shen's plan going forward. Irrespective of what the court decision is, irrespective of what Governor Hochul or our health commissioner says, It is our school. It is our children. Neighboring schools are taking that type of action. Shenendehowa is not. You think you've led through this? You followed. You followed orders from state unelected officials appointed by a governor, yet another one that had to get booted out of office. And we're going to rely on them to tell us how to take care of our children, either the Department of Health or the New York State Education Department? I'm not. Are you? Good night.
I'm sorry. You'd like to do both, yes.
It's okay. I'm good. Actually, I can see you better from here.
Oh, okay. I'm John Bedeluco. I'm a senior here. I live at 17 Wallflower Drive. Man, it's been a good 2 years, right? That's how we see it sometimes. It's been really draining. Here, coming from some parents not respecting you for what you believe in. Some parents saying one thing and then just no inclusion anymore within any family. So here I stand today in front of all of you. Thank you for allowing us, the public, to speak in front of you. Respectfully, we hope. So thank you again. I'd like to say a few things, some of which are fairly personal. I will not be saying any names, but unfortunately, I have received threats and something along that nature of saying, I've actually gotten pictures taken of me on the day of Tuesday, I believe was the day when it was allowed to that we were allowed to not wear a mask. A picture was taken of me during a gym class, wishing death upon me and my parents, or my family per se. I am strong enough not to take that personally. I know that God loves everybody, and God loves me, and God loves anybody for how they believe, and everybody has the right to freedom and how they want to see life as it is. So here I stand saying this has been draining on everybody, not just people of anti-mask, not people of pro-mask, but everybody in general. Kids in 5th grade, younger, however you want to see it, they're losing social skills. They're losing social skills, they're losing just conversation. They're not able to properly learn. Teachers fear them into things. Their parents are fearing them into things that don't need to be feared anymore. Yes, COVID has its spikes. A long time ago when it scared a lot of people. Yes, it scared a lot of people. But my dad, who has diabetes, he's over it. He believes that what he has going for him works. He's had COVID and he was perfectly fine. It was a long time ago. He's very happy with his life, but he's over it. Everybody's over it, and I believe that it's overdue, and I believe that kids need their freedoms back. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Crystal Rogan. I'm Old Vader Farms, Half Moon. As you guys know, I've been here before talking about my son Mark. He was the little boy who tried to jump in front of your school buses because of the mask mandate. Thankfully, he was given a medical exemption. And because of what had happened here at the school, he was placed at an out-of-district school. With that being said, with the uptick of COVID and the whatever new virus it is, last month he was only able to attend school one day. One day. And it wasn't because of positive COVID tests, it was because of fear. They were fearful of, they shut down for the first 2 weeks of December for you know, abundance of caution was the email. After that, they sent my son home the first day he was able to return because he was crying and his nose was stuffed and running from crying. So they isolated him immediately off the bus and had me come and pick him up and wouldn't let him return until he had a negative PCR test. As you know, during that time, it took a while to get a PCR test, even though I got it the same day. We didn't get results until that Friday, so there was another week of school he missed. And his PCR test was surprisingly negative, because it had nothing to do with COVID. This is stuff he knows from crying because he didn't want to go back because he had 2 weeks off. Then he returned to school for his one full day, December 20th. And the next day, they closed again for staffing issues. And so he didn't return to school until after Christmas break. So my 8-year-old autistic child that has had severe mental detriments done to him because of COVID and what's happening here, and has gone completely backwards, has now regressed completely backwards again. And I've had phone calls just about every day. Once again, where the school nurse called and said, "Hey, is your son sick?" Which is kind of weird, because obviously you don't need to call me and ask me if he's sick if you see that he has symptoms for something. And so that's an ongoing game there. It is really affecting him, and he's not able to have a good day at school anymore without being put into a timeout room or being held and restrained because he just can't take it anymore. Another thing is, on Tuesday, when my children had the legal right to not come to school with a mask, my daughter in 4th grade presented her note. She was so proud that she was able to go to school and have a normal day. And I had a conversation with her teacher about this, and she admitted she panicked when she read the note and stood up and offered the entire class 20 extra bonus points to keep their masks on and put them back on. My kids were coerced out of their legal right, and I was having my parental authority taken away from me. What else are you guys gonna bribe me to do? What else are you gonna do to undermine my parental authority? My son in 9th grade was kicked out of German class for not having his mask on because the teacher was afraid. He had to stay in the school office, and until the principal was able to return, he told him to take a couple laps and not worry about it. Also that day, my same son in math class, who sat in the back, but he was definitely distanced from everybody else, had a friend that was next to him, obviously distanced because of the way the desks are made, placed, was told by the math teacher that she feared for his safety, his friend's safety, who had a mask on, and he insisted that he was fine. And she just continuously said, "I fear for your safety, I fear for your safety, you need to move, you need to move, you can't sit next to him, you fear for your safety." I'm really nervous about when the mask mandates end the mental stability of a lot of these teachers. What are they gonna do? That's what scares me. I think y'all need to think about that too, because I don't think these people are gonna be able to handle the change when it comes. And if they're doing that with the one child in the classroom, can you imagine the overwhelming anxiety and fear they're gonna have when it's an entire class of kids with a mask on? Thank you.
I'd like to thank everybody for their comments tonight. Really appreciate that. Moving on to the agenda, Dr. Robinson, for your report.
Sure, so I'm going to fold my comments into when we get to some of the presentations.
Yep.
So I'll do that. The board has the claim audit report and those things. If there are any questions, Mrs. Chase is here to address questions you may have. Okay.
I do want to talk about the minutes. There's a couple of comments we had on professional services.
Yeah.
We can bring, when that comes up.
No, I mean, that's the next one, so again.
Yeah, so we had some debate on how we're managing professional services contract, and this is something that I brought up because we're looking for things to put on the docket to review next year. The audit report itself talks about some deliberate audits on things that we thought were potential for improving our financial work here to be accountable. And one of the things that I suggested was to look at professional services, but the response from Mrs. Chase was, put my concerns to rest. We take these things very seriously. There are some services we have that aren't really, I would say, professional services. The other extreme are things that we put out to bid that are basic commodities like paper and bread and food. And then there are things that we pay for services that aren't really meeting the criterion of a professional service. And there are other things we do, for example, legal support. Okay, so how we manage that, we really have 4 types of lawyers. We don't really work with one law firm. We're trying to work with people that have expertise. And we evaluate their work as we proceed through the work of legal issues. We also work with an architectural firm. And they've been with us for many years, but what I learned from Mrs. Chase is that we did several years ago bid some work out to another architectural firm. And we found out that their support was lacking relative to the one we get from our regular firm. And I think she also pointed out that professional services contracts aren't the same as other types of contracts that you do review on an annual basis. So my feeling is her conversation really helped me to understand how well thought out our approach is here. Now, some board members might disagree, and we should challenge and talk about it. But I think your start point should be to review, with Mrs. Chase or Dr. Robinson, ideally with Dr. Robinson, and just say, what are your concerns here? I think, with what we're doing and the support we're getting is superior, top quality. At the same time, you always want to look at what you're doing and making sure that you're meeting your standards regularly. But my concerns were put to rest by having that conversation. And go ahead.
I mean, when I read through, I had no further comment. I thought it was pretty straightforward.
Yeah, the only thing I just want to mention in Father Wilson that we're going to look at the auditor situation. We're still unpacking that, so hopefully in this Friday I have hopefully some update to share with the board. I want to sort of have conversation with the public because it's about a contractual relationship that we have right now. So more to come on the audit. If you note again, I know that Father Wilson related to this piece of it. So that's the one thing that we have to figure out what we're going to unpack auditing services for this year. Recognize some limitations right now.
I just wanted to make one comment, just thoughts since you brought up the minutes. There's a mention in there about RFPs for professional services are not required because it's qualitative. That might just be an error in the minutes because I don't think that's accurate, right? I mean, we do RFPs for professional services. I think we have one on the agenda today. So just because, I mean, that's best value, you're balancing qualifications and costs. So that might just be a misnomer. I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay.
Just because of what you said.
Captain, we'll look at that and make sure it reflects what the discussion was.
Right.
And the only thing I'd like to add, because I know why you brought it up, this came up back in the summer when we were talking about contracts. And really one of the points I was trying to make is that we actually don't have a policy on the section of law that requires we have policy. So I'm not on the policy committee, but I think this is something worth, that merits a second look. And specifically the municipal law 104B.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good. So I'm going to transition, Lindsay, so we have that presentation to the budget media projection one. Yeah, so, and again, I won't go into a lot of the details. Some of it is a repeat, but I think it's important to put what we're talking about tonight in the context as we move forward. We went through the budget assumptions and expectations presentation, which kind of grounds the process in terms of, what I call the pseudo-givens. And so tonight, as we talk about Mrs. Chase come forward and talk about the 3-year forecast, there's certain assumptions that we make that drive the budget, right? So we call them pseudo-givens. I say pseudo because nothing is absolute, right? There's always potential of things changing. and then expectation and speak to the desired outcomes that we want the budget to have, be it financial outcomes, program outcomes, or otherwise. And so we know it, we own it, and then we try to articulate the why is kind of how we look at making decision making. So with that being said, a piece that I want to walk through because it's important as we kind of unpack the budget. Again, some of these things you've seen on the budget assumption piece. When we think about the budget, we're looking at how does the budget impact program or operational enhancements. So in other words, what we're providing for our students and how we provide for our students. And that goes instructionally and non-instructionally across the board. And so the equity and outcomes piece is a big piece of it. And particularly now, we're talking about how and how do we try to bridge any potential learning gaps and provide sustainable supports, not only for a year, but over time. So the budget creates that opportunity to look at those kind of bridging those gaps as we move forward. Talks about capacity. And last time, Dr. Wood walked through the Shenendehowa framework. So when we look at program design and we think about those kind of things within the context of that framework in terms of building capacity forward. The program enhancements, the mental health piece that comes with this piece of it, social learning within, again, with an equity framework. The equity framework comes from the fact that it's not about one size fit all. It's about understanding the unique needs and situation of kids as much as possible and try to address the unique needs and situation of kids versus having a canned way, everybody's going to do this, everybody's going to do that, because sometimes that's not the most effective use of resources and or effective approach to addressing a particular issue. And then we're also talking about reframing professional development, recognizing that we're cycling through many things. And many things has changed as a result of how schools have been structured over the past 18 to 24 months. And many things are going to change as a result of how technology evolves as we move forward. So how do we reframe how we provide professional development is a big piece of that, because about how do we ensure that we're retooling ourselves all the time as a system. And ourselves are people, organizations are made up of people. So how do we constantly have that focus on retooling as a priority? So professional growth and development is a priority for the system. We talk about repurposing opportunities. And so you're going to hear as the budget process unfolds. How do we look at personnel management is a big part of what we do. When you think about 80+% of our resources are spent on personnel. We hire people to do the job. We buy tools, instruments to give people to an effective job. But we hire people to do a job. We're a people business. And so we're looking at those kind of things and looking at the whole productivity quotient piece of it in terms of, do we have the right people doing the right things, trained the right way with the right resources so that we're maximizing efficiency all the time. So what's that productivity quotient? How do we increase that by doing different things? And so then we're looking at some opportunities. As we look at retirements, what does that present for us in terms of opportunities? As we look at vacancies within the budget, what does that present for us in terms of opportunities? As we look at attrition, what does that look at as opportunities? So we always try to look at these key points as opportunity points of potential to repurpose resources to, again, provide greater capacity to do more. And in some cases, we're doing more with the same. In some cases, even doing more with less. But the point is trying to do more. That's the focus, a piece of it. And certainly leveraging the federal dollars. You saw last week the pretty complex spreadsheet that's been created to look at all the federal resources and really try to use the dollar in as much as we can in transformational ways, recognizing there will be some back costs, things that we're going to offset because it allows us to do certain things. So, but again, leveraging those resources to have a meaningful impact moving forward, and at the same time having that off-ramp, because we can't have a situation that we're creating that structural deficit. So what's that exit strategy as we move forward when federal funds start to dry up? So again, I'm kind of giving this as a backdrop because these are the fundamental tenets, if you will, that drive the budget process. It's not a process based upon, let's see where the wind is blowing. It's not a process based upon who speaks loudest, guess what. It's a process, very deliberative process that goes through and look at it from a system lens and see how do we always try to enhance the capacity of the system. So with that being said, we analyzed a lot of data points, a lot of information points. And so this just gives you a flavor of, that's what I call it Budget 101. We spent a lot of time looking at staffing capacity, looking at scattergrams. Who are the people that work for us? What are the ages? Where are people on the salary schedule? What does this mean 5 years if we have a certain number of people on a particular step? What does that look like down the road in terms of how we hire new people and all those kind of things? trying to make sure that we can anticipate whatever the future might be as much as we can by the decision that we're making currently, and how does that play out down the road. We look at enrollment pieces, and again, trying to look at the capacity piece. Flat enrollment, what does flat enrollment actually mean? Is it flat district-wide, or do we have bubbles or pockets going in different areas that we need to take into consideration? So all those kind of things come into the budget process. We look at cost trends, and probably the biggest cost trends are the contractual obligations we have. So when we settle contracts, typically most contracts we settle, personnel contracts, are 3 to 4 to 5 years, and so that's a wide window. So what's the cost implication of those settlements when we settle them? So when we settle a contract, and I say, oh yeah, contracts settled, we have to think right away, what does this mean 2-3 years down the road before we even say, yes, this is something that's acceptable or not? So we look at those kind of things, look at health insurance trends, look at what's the delta, what's that difference. And right now, health insurance is a tricky one, because the piece that's really driving it is the cost of drugs. Drugs cost, particular specialty costs, you're going to hear Kathy talk about it tonight, when we look at our mid-year piece, certain specialty drugs have just gone through the roof, to the point where we're working with our providers right now to say, whoa, we got to have a better way of handling this piece of it, because literally, like overnight, this just came out of the way, all these specialty drugs. And I joke with people all the time, when you're watching television, all those commercials that look so wonderful, go buy this for the term that you can't pronounce. Those are the specialty drugs that are just off the chain in terms of cost. I mean, huge cost, $70,000, $80,000 for one individual kind of cost. We're not talking about 50, tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars specialty drugs that's been loaned on us. So we're looking at those kind of things as we're looking forward, pension costs, revenue trends. So state aid is a big one that we're looking at this year from a positive perspective. The next 2 years as those trends move forward, and how those things then play out in terms of our revenues, our reserves, and our fund balance. So I share those as a backdrop, because as we go through this process, it's important for us to keep this piece of it. This particular graphics is actually, I tell my colleagues across the state that this is a great litmus test as a superintendent. I call it the shares. Most school budget shares should fall in these categories. So your instructional salary should be fluctuating around 35, 36, 37%. If you're way higher than that, there's something else going on that you need to look at. I'm not saying it's good, bad, otherwise, there's something going on. Also, so the big rocks and the big shares that we typically look at, if you look at the first three, kind of lump all those in together, about 55, 56% of your budget. And so look at those shares. Then you look at your benefit shares, and if you look at most school budgets, should be around that about a quarter to about 26, 27% of your budget. So this is kind of that litmus test that we kind of go through and say, okay, are we still within the reasonableness criteria, if you will, as we develop budget, or are we seeing a situation that's causing things to go out of whack? So these shares become a big piece of it. And again, I share that with you because even when we do the 3-year projection, 3-year forecast out, do those shares hold, even in a 3-year or 5-year round? And then when do we start seeing erosion in that, and asking the question why? So this slide is much more powerful than I think people get credence to, because this is actually how resources are distributed within the budget and how ultimately resources are expended. So when you think about, equipment, so less than 0.5% of our budget is spent on equipment. And so you think about that, and so when you hear someone say, oh, you spend $800,000 on equipment, but when you kind of bring it back in the larger context, it's a very small portion of the budget sequence. And just to give you some examples of how some of those kind of things plays out. So again, for me, this is something over the years I've just studied and looked at different budget sequence and seen if this pattern holds, and it holds pretty consistently, certainly for us and for many other places. So as we kind of continue the budget process and unpack these kind of things, we're always trying to maintain that balance between program preservation. In other words, students shouldn't have a good year, bad year. We shouldn't say, oh, well, sorry, kid, last year was a great resource year for us. This is not such a great resource. So we're trying to preserve program first. And so sometimes people think that if nothing new is in the budget, it's not, oh, there's nothing new in the budget. Program preservation is the primary objective of the budget. Keep doing the good things that you're doing. And so that's a big piece of it. And we're trying to manage that, then try to see where certain things that we do, when do we make a change before we start having those diminishing returns? So we're not just doing stuff just because we already did it. We're always assessing, do we need to continue to do it? What do we need to modify as things and circumstances evolve? And so we're always trying to do that piece of it. And then the backside of this, how do we always try to avoid a situation that we're not spending into a point where you start cutting to balance the budget. So there's certain things we can control, there's certain other factors, outside factors being stated otherwise, that impact that piece of it, but there's certain management pieces that we can control as well. And so there's some things that we're gonna be watching, recognizing that the court case related to foundation aid is out there, just a matter of will the legislature fully go with what's the court ruling was related to foundation aid. Every indicator is yes, they will, and probably some more, who knows. So we're looking at that 2-3 year window to see what does that mean for us, because it's great to say, well, you had this increase for 2 or 3 years, and then what does year 4 and 5 look like if you don't have that increase? And so we have to play that scenario out right now, because if year 4 and 5 looks like, whoa, it's a high increase, we have to figure that how do we mitigate that and balance that over the next 2 years so it can flow into year 4 and 5, and not having year 4 and 5 be a shock to the system, so to speak. So we're looking at those kind of things, similar with the federal funds. So I share all that with you because 4 things we're going to walk through tonight. Brief, but not too brief for Mr. Gilbert. We won't go through every detail, but certainly enough for the board to have appreciation of it. And we shared a PDF version of it with you earlier in the day if you had a chance to look at it. If you didn't, you're going to see some of this stuff resonate. I just want to point out 2 things before Mrs. Chase starts, and I click on this. So the mid-year is a projection. We're just projecting out based upon what we know. That's a projection. The 3-year is a forecast. Neither one of these things are budgets. There's a difference between budgeting and forecasting and projecting, right? Those are different methodologies that we use to ultimately impact how we budget moving forward. So Kathy's going to walk through the mid-year piece. I'm going to try to blow it up. I apologize that it might be small for people in the audience looking at it. We'll certainly try to get some of this information out. It's just a lot of information to generate. So Kathy, you want to go through did I put up the right one, Kathy?
Yes. So this is our kickoff point for the budget. Really allows us to kind of sink into the numbers. As we look at the mid-year financial report, one of the things that kind of becomes obvious is that we budgeted very tightly this year. As our adjusted budget appears that we're expending 98.56%, the adopted budget 98.99%. And just to clarify that difference, the adopted budget is what the voters voted on and approved last May. The adjusted budget includes carryover encumbrances and budget transfers. So slightly different numbers, but I wanted to give you both perspectives there. Typically, as we look at our budget, we're in that 96–97% range, but we are budgeting a little more tightly in the last year or so, and COVID has played a big part in that because there's a lot of unknowns there, as well as health insurance, which is also affected by COVID. So just getting into the numbers, our instructional salaries, we are planning to spend almost 99%, a little over 99%. We've had a couple of retirements, 4 retirements, 15 resignations.
Kathy, let me ask you this.
Sure.
Is it easier, let's walk through the summary one?
Pardon me?
To walk through the summary document, that might be easier.
This one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do that. Because that might be easier for the board and the public to follow that discussion.
Sure. So under the instructional salaries, we had 38 new hires this year. And we've had some leaves of absence, 50 COVID-related absences, 76 non-COVID related absences, and of those, 26 were unpaid. So all of those things affect plus and minus our total expenditures in those codes, because we're looking for substitutes, which of course we have a shortage on. So some of the costs to cover those classes are costing us more because we're seeking out kind of scarce resources in that regard. Similar, as we look at the administrative salaries, we had 3 new hires. And by that, I mean 3 new hires since we prepared the budget last year. So you might say, oh, not 3 new hires since July 1st, but it's since the budget has been prepared. And we also had 3 leaves of absence. Under non-instructional salaries, a lot of movement here. We've had 43 retirements, 63 resignations, and when I say resignations, sometimes they are resignations from a current position to take another position with us. We've had 117 new hires, and again, some of those might be new hires from a different position. 62 COVID leaves and 123 non-COVID leaves, of those 56 being unpaid. So all of that movement provides opportunities to repurpose, as Dr. Arkinson was saying. We can leave vacancies, we can reanalyze and see where the positions are that we need. Substitute costs offset it somewhat, but scarce substitutes kind of puts us in a different category this year.
Kathy, can you explain COVID leaves? So have
Sure.
some sense of what does that mean?
So COVID leaves means that either the person has been required to isolate because they have COVID or quarantine because of COVID. Last year, if you recall, we were required to do so and we got reimbursed some this year. We got reimbursement. That ended, I believe, in September. So while we still are required to do some COVID leaves without people having to access their sick leave, we will not be getting reimbursed that we know of at this point. So that will be a cost that we would be incurring as a school district.
So it's because the state allowed for longer leave periods beyond what people's contractual obligations were. And so that's why the leaves all of a sudden were longer again, and that law changed, and so we have to make the adjustment midstream with that as well. Okay.
It all gets very complicated, as everything with COVID does, right? Moving on to benefits, we have about $819,000 in savings there, and typically we have a lot more savings here, but as we were talking about before, the specialty drugs have just taken up. We don't have a lot of claimants with specialty drugs. I think we identified maybe 6, and not by person, just by claim history with our broker. But within 6 people, we had a significant amount of expenditures with specialty drugs. So assuming that trend is going to continue, our health insurance cost is actually exceeding our budget as we predict where we're going to be at the end of the year. The other benefits, ERS, TRS, and Social Security are a factor of salaries, so when there's plus and minus there, those benefits go with it. I don't want to rush too quickly through this. Any questions so far on salary and benefits? Okay. Equipment, as we talked about, we expect to fully expend the equipment. We always have far more requests than we have money, so we'll be fully expending that. Contractual, sorry.
Yeah, there's savings, but we're spending 143% of the budget. Can you just walk
Of
through
the
that?
original budget.
Okay.
So, because we had carryover encumbrances in our equipment line, that means we had monies from last year being carried over into this year to expend.
Okay.
So we placed an order at some point at the end of last year.
Right.
The money carries forward so we can pay
Last
for
year's
it
funds
this year.
dispersed this year.
Right. Contractual services, one of the big items there was staff development, and we had intended to bring in some specialists on block scheduling and do quite a lot of PD on that this year. We're finding that because of lack of substitutes and being able to take teachers out of the classroom, really did not provide that opportunity to do as we expected this year. And I would say that's probably the case in much of the PD that we scheduled this year. Most departments, I would say at one point or another, were down people, either because they were on an absence or because we've had resignations and found it difficult to replace people. So that's impacted the budget in a variety of ways. We had some savings in utilities, judgments and claims, and gasoline and bus fuel, which, as you know, prices are going up with fuel. So not as much savings in gasoline as we expected for our trans department this year. Textbook and library books, all expenditure-driven aids, and we expect to maximize those aid categories this year. BOCES, we expect a little bit of savings. We did have some carryover encumbrances, so 108% of the original budget is being expended. Part of that is because hardware expenses have traditionally gone through BOCES, because the hardware aid and the BOCES aid is actually about the same. So there's kind of a, kind of a trade-off there. And in addition, our elementary CBL instruction goes through BOCES this year, which was not something we budgeted. We didn't know we were going to be doing that this year, but that's another BOCES cost that will be aidable for us. Supplies, expect to fully expend that category. Transfers to other funds, we will have some savings in food service because they are showing that they're able to sustain the program this year. However, we expect summer special ed is probably going to expend more than we budgeted for this year based on trend. Any questions on the expenditure side before I go into the revenue side? Okay. Real property tax, we expect that we'll realize all of our real property taxes as the county makes us whole. State aid, we have about a $226,000 shortfall. You can see it's made up of a number of categories. One of the areas that we talked about was foundation aid. We expect to fully get that amount. There's a little bit of a shortfall because of incarcerated youth and homeless youth expenses being deducted out of there. The rest are expenditure-driven aids. The one I wanted to point out was building aid. While it says a shortfall of $914,000, that's really a timing of cost reporting. And our projections didn't necessarily anticipate that we'd file cost reports in December. But because we did from this last project, we expect to get 50% of a year's aid in June, which will reduce this shortfall by probably half, I would say. That's what I'm predicting.
Kathy, can you just spend a minute and just explain how we go from complete a project, hand bills, submitting final cost report and aid? Because I think sometimes people think that there's a lag, and then the state also pays you over a period of time.
Right. So when we go out for a referendum, we'll borrow, in this case, this last one, we borrowed, I think, $22 million. We will borrow that over the course of 15 years. And the reason it's 15 years is because the state aids us over 15 years. They won't aid you any less than that. They won't aid you any more than that. They will aid you over 15 years. So we try to match up the expense with the revenues so that we've got a manageable, consistent net cost every year. And that, of course, comes after the project is essentially completed because the work will continue, bills will get paid, we borrow money in order to pay those bills, and then we finally bond that borrowing, and once it's bonded, that's when it goes into the annual state aid payments for building aid.
And how many kids do we know, Kathy, we get a number of homeless kids, the numbers have gone up somewhat.
Homeless kids, this is actually from 2 years ago, 139,000. We actually didn't budget for homeless because we didn't used to get homeless aid. We refined our practices, and 2 years ago we had 59 homeless and 17 unaccompanied youth. I was actually shocked by that number. In 2021, we had 52 homeless and 18 unaccompanied youth. This year so far, we have 20 homeless, so the good news is that number seems to be going down. But we do get aid when we file for, they call them stacks, but state aid requests for homeless youth. Interest income, $29,000 shortfall. We expect to get about $21,000 this year. Pretty pathetic. Federal revenue, $132,000 shortfall. Medicare Part D is always a little bit of a timing issue. And the other thing is the more Medicare Advantage plans that we have reduces the amount of Medicare Part D reimbursements we have, because that's only available for our straight out prescription plan, not Medicare Part D prescriptions. Other revenue items, we exceeded what we expected, but part of that is because we started getting some reimbursements for our COVID expenses. Part of it is for the absences for last year, as we were talking about, $415,000. We received some money based on kind of a complicated formula for some of our food service expenses that the general fund subsidized last year. And we received some additional workers' comp federal reimbursements as well. We're seeing a reduction in foster care tuitions that we're able to bill out, which basically means that we're seeing reduced foster care students in our system, which is good. 1920, we had 2 students, and in 2021, we had 6 students, but prior to that, we were seeing double digits. So, so it's actually come down. So putting all that together, what we're seeing is an operational surplus of $3.1 million. That puts us in a spot where we expect that we'll be within the 4% statutory limit on our fund balance. That assumes that we replenish our reserves that we allocate every year, meaning the retirement contribution reserve, employee benefit accrued liability reserve, and I also anticipated in this scenario that we would potentially fund our TRS sub-reserve at $750,000. That's a discussion we will have at the end of the year when we see what actual numbers come to play. One scenario of many we could look at. Any questions on the mid-year review? And I'll just go into the 3-year forecast. As we talked a little bit about, the 3-year forecast is really a mathematical exercise. We take the mid-year projections that we just talked about and basically take off from there based on mathematical formula what it's going to look like over the next 3 to 5 years. We made several assumptions, one being that salary and benefits will be based on either contract settlements or trends. Health insurance projections, I used 12% because that's what we're being told as worst case scenario this year. BOCES costs average somewhere between 2 and 3%, utilities 5%, other costs 2%. And debt service, I use kind of our actual, if you will, and that's based on our last debt service schedule, where we were projecting that we would be budgeting $8.8 million for the next several years to keep it very stable and flatline with our latest referendum borrowing.
Well, how close are we when we do this?
So here, let me show you. That's a good question, Deanna. So let me just, Kath, let me just jump in for a second, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So this exercise is an interesting exercise we do, and I call it exercise, right? So I'm just trying to blow it up so you can see it a little bit more. If you look at the bottom line here, so this is, the first column is 21, 22, then we have 22, 23, 23, 24, right? Just so you kind of keep the sequence. And so when we kind of go through this exercise, we say, absent going through real deliberations. In other words, if we just do, you know, a mechanical thing, so we're not putting any effort in the budget. You say, hey, give me a budget tomorrow, and I'll run a bunch of numbers, and here's a budget. But does it really reflect a lot of other factors, right? So always look at this, so we talk about 4.82, 5.27, 5.0. So we look at that and say, okay, I'm always saying, if we're in that ballpark, I know that we are, what I call massage the process, right? That we get it down at least about half and been consistent with where our budgets have been over the last several years. So we run this because we always want to keep looking out and say, does it, we still seen a similar trend even 3 to 5 years out? Because I don't think this one is showing it, but we have 5 years out. And after 3 years, it's kind of like, okay, what assumption really hold 5 years from now the same way? 2 or 3 years from a lot of them, you kind of see it, especially like you have contracts, you know, certain contracts are gonna settle out in 2 years or expire, we have to renegotiate. So we look at some of those kind of things. Or the ones that are settled out, we look at the past trends and say, okay, the last 3 years, the percentage increase or X, we just extrapolate it out. So that makes it not as close, but it gives us that ballpark saying that once we start really then, I use the word, again, massage probably not a word, fine tuning all the details and the what if assumptions, those things I mentioned before, looking at scattergram, looking at real cost, then we know we can get the budget down to a reasonable piece of it. So this has been very consistent over the years, and the end result budget has also been very consistent with that. And so we look at that. So here's an interesting one that Kathy and Elizabeth and I met this morning, because I woke up in that 2:30 full bore sweat thinking like, holy crap, I just remember what I saw on the spreadsheet, and that can't be. So I'm thinking, so on the revenue side, yeah, I think about these things in my sleep. On the revenue side, I remember Kathy having down here tax levy, this last one down here tax levy, they were like 8-9%. And I'm sitting there thinking like, hold on, what's wrong with that assumption? And what was the assumption was, and we had a meeting this morning at 8 o'clock, scheduled already. So the assumption that Kathy used in the revenue piece of it was maintaining the foundation aid based upon this year, current, and not the modeling of the increases, right? And so all of a sudden, it's with that now, because we holding, this year is actually holding past 3 years flat. And so if we're gonna go 3 years flat back and 3 years flat out, after a while, the implication get wide fast. So that was kind of the first thing that, hold on, so then we made the adjustment, and so now even with budget, so again, it's not a budget, so hypothetically, if we saw a budget at 5.25%, if we hold revenues the way we see revenues, we'll be around tax levy impact around 1.5–2%, which is so it's a good thing. So think about that, right? So when we look at this, then it says to us that as we look at program design, we have some opportunities, but on the same note, while we have opportunities, it's kind of like you can't spend all your money on dinner and don't have anything for dessert, and yet you want dessert, right? So it's why we look at that. We said, okay, it creates some opportunity. So now how do we start to literally spread this out over time so that we keep that same kind of consistency? And so you hear people all the time say, well, the Shen budget is always going to be this. That's actually a good thing. It's good for taxpayers because it becomes predictable for people, all of us who pay our tax bills in the school district. You know that your tax bill is going to be roughly around the same thing, and many people have escrow, so you know it's going to be roughly around the same thing, either flat or slightly below, unless the value of your house just went to the roof because of, you know, that could be, so some people can get that too, like, hey, you said it, but I'm paying more taxes. Well, your house was worth $250,000 and now it's worth $300,000 or $350,000. It's a good problem, but still a problem, right? So that's why we run this simulation, to kind of give us both sides of a conservative look at expenditure, a conservative look at revenues. What's that tax implication piece? Right away, we start to get a feel of that. And so that becomes the primary gauge, because the reason why that's a primary gauge, because of the tax cap. Because the tax cap is going to force us back into a starting spot. So that's why we always have to come back to, okay, how far away are we from that tax cap limit? And if so typically we are right in that bargain. We haven't had to do a supermajority vote since the tax cap has been, because we end up in that space. So that's the other factor that comes into play. So when we do these 3-year forecasts, it's really just to try to look out and say, okay, you know what, the lazy man's budget, lazy woman's budget, not calling the cat lazy, the lazy woman's budget is just doing a mathematical thing versus the real process that we go through now. So Elizabeth, we with all the AAs. Kathy meet with all the operation folks. We have tons and tons and tons and tons of data that we analyze all sorts of what ifs to try to really squeeze down. Jill analyzed all the staffing and vacancies, what Kathy just mentioned. All these vacancies, real vacancies. Especially now, we have a lot of term people coming in, filling in. So we have to think about, okay, who are the people that someone was in for? So if Deanna's gonna be back next year, I can't budget for me at a lower cost. I gotta budget for Deanna at a higher cost coming back in. And so all those kind of factors we have to keep into the equation as we massage out. So this gives us a higher degree of confidence that we'll have a budget once we start unpacking the budget from our numbers that's gonna be still very consistent for what we have been doing. And some real potential to do some different things. The good thing with the federal funds on the other side of it, some of the things that we're gonna do with the federal fund, it creates I don't wanna say easier, meaning like no-brainer, but it creates a better opportunity for us to have off-ramps 2 years out, 3 years out, because it's not like we have a budget already high. You have federal dollars, and then if you're gonna try to offload some of these federal expenses in this budget, it's only gonna go higher, right? So if you have a budget that's moderate or low, and if you have to offset some of these expenditures that we wanna keep 2 years out, it's a slight bump up versus something that's significant. Does that make some sense? So that's also part of the reason why we go to this gyration, to see how this may play out, both the federal funds in this case and the budget, the tax levy implication and the budget, the program and service need and the budget. So we're trying to do all these kind of juxtaposition of different things at different times and trying to see a picture that's clear enough that when we go out to the taxpayers and say, this is a budget that's worthwhile supporting, it's not only worthwhile supporting for this year, it's worthwhile supporting into the future. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So again, Kathy, thank you. So we won't go through the other stuff, but that's why I started with that first piece of it, because sometimes people see the end product of the budget and not have an appreciation of, these are all the things we have to think about. And for you as a board, this 3-year thing, particularly if you're a tax levy conscious person, you say, okay, you know what? In a conservative, when I say conservative, in other words, we're not doing a lot of deep analysis. We're applying mathematically. And the tax levy is that, wow, that's pretty good. And it can only, quite frankly, get better unless we make some grave decisions that blow the expenditures out of the water, which we don't necessarily anticipate doing. So I think from a voter piece to see and knowing this is a good exercise. And by the way, this is not a standard exercise that most school districts do. Because one, it takes a lot of, Captain literally worked all weekend trying to, because we wanted to get it out to you Friday, and you saw my 11 on Friday bulletin that because of some other circumstances, but she was making up time, right? And so we could be ready tonight with some accurate information, and we'll still massage this even after tonight, because we still want to run some scenarios, because we look at it a year from now, we look at this document again, to say, where were we then, and how does this, back to Deanna's first question, how does this align to where we were, to make sure that we see the same trends, or similar trends over time? Make sense?
Makes sense.
The building condition survey, I just put it on in case the board needed some back information on that. It's going to be approved. We're going to have to do a building condition survey. It's a 5-year thing. We have to do it as a part of the law. We have to do it part of our referendum, because we can't get state aid until we have these things in our building conditions plan. And so I just put that more, not necessarily even to go over it, but just so you have some backfill information.
So a couple years ago, we had this consultant, I think CP Mail came in. What was their name? They basically looked at all our buildings.
No, that was part of, Mosaic probably had, what's the engineering firm, Kathy? Scott Swenson. Engineer Solutions.
Okay. So, but this should be us checking to make sure we're properly running the buildings. We're not setting ourselves up for failure with too much of an energy load on buildings.
Yeah. So what the state started doing, the state was trying to control the explosion of capital projects that were happening some years back, because there was tons and tons. So they're saying, okay, this one side of it. The second side of it, most school buildings in probably most states, certainly New York, are aging buildings, because, you know, our schools, our buildings are old buildings. And so they wanted to make sure that every 5 years, and they were very diligent about it, and then they kind of paused, and because the state was also overwhelmed with their capacity to analyze all these studies that they were getting. So it's kind of, we want you to do this report, but so now they have a schedule. So they have us on on a much more elongated schedule than this piece of it. So it still translates to about every 5 years. Anyway, so we do everything from mechanical analysis of buildings to roof to all the things that then goes into this massive spreadsheet. So when we start thinking about referendum, so if the board decided we want to do building A, well, yes, you could propose to do building A, and you're gonna have to address some of these things on this building condition. That's why sometimes when people say, well, I thought we only wanted to do this, but you can't, because you're doing that, but at the detriment of something that's gonna cost a heck of a lot more down the road than to keep, so we're not doing a deferred maintenance piece. So that's also part of it. So with that, then we prioritize health and safety type things. What are the things of health and safety? So that's why every construction project, we're gonna do something with asbestos. Because every building, everywhere, that's what, there was a material that was being used in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And so that's where this comes into play, to help prioritize some of those health and safety things, juxtaposed against those program needs that districts might be putting as a part of a referendum as well, because that goes into the formula that the state then used for reimbursement purposes. So it's a long, convoluted process that we go through and creates this huge spreadsheet. I mean, we probably have $60–80 million worth of stuff that we could be doing, but we prioritize it because the life of a boiler, for instance, we still, I think, if I'm not mistaken, Kathy, I think this year might be the last year that we're up to replacing original boilers.
Yeah, I think
So think about that, original boilers from buildings, but if it's, so we always say if it's working great, can we get another year out of it, because it's not a cheap proposition, but to get to the point, we have to get some point replace those things out because of energy efficiency and everything else. And so just give you an example of that, Bob. So that's why we go through this extensive piece. So the architects come in, the engineer solution come in, they bring in whoever, we have the roof guys come in, they do whatever the test that they do on miles and miles of roof to make sure that the penetration, all those kind of things happen, and then they generate a list of potential projects, and we spread those over a number of years by prioritization of usefulness, health and safety, and otherwise. So it's a pretty interesting process. Way more than you want to know how to do.
It's all good, man, you're all down rabbit holes tonight. All good.
So I'm Becky Carmen for tonight as well. If there are questions that you have on the policies, I'd be more than happy to address them. We have members of the policy review here as well. And I know Mr. Preston always does a nice summary to the board in terms of some of the key things. So if there are questions on first reading the policy, I'd be more than happy to address those.
No, Bob, you did a good job on that. I really appreciate this breakdown. This is good. Jason, that was a good suggestion. It was good.
So no questions, stop being Becky.
Yep, okay, great.
Madam President's you.
All right, so just tell me if I'm off, I have my own agenda. I'll have to run the agenda with me, will you? So make sure I don't screw it up. All right, so first thing, treasurer's report. Can I get a motion? Todd is first, Jason is second. Any comments or questions? All in favor? Motion passes. January 11th, January 25th minutes. Everybody was here. Thank you very much. Here's our motion. Todd's first, Gus is second. Any questions, concerns? All in favor? Motion passes. Moving on to action items. Number 1, acceptance of internal audit reports and corrective action plans for COVID leaves of absent report. Can I get a motion? Bob is first, Gus is second. Any comments or questions? All in favor? Motion passes. Number 2, building condition survey and 5-year facilities plan. Can I get a motion? Todd is first, Bob is second. Any concerns or questions?
No, just want to say kudos for the RFP.
We should have put the asterisk, the younger RFP.
No.
No, just joking,
Okay.
no.
All in favor?
It's a small, it's a small.
Motion
Okay,
passes.
good.
Number 3, approval of additional ECA clubs, non-cash clubs, and classroom accounts, 21 to 22. Naomi's first, Jason is second. Any comments?
This is good to look at because every year we have a couple of new clubs, okay? And this is and we have a couple of new clubs this year, okay? So even as we have COVID, we still have.
We're moving on.
We're thriving because, Coda wants a ski club. That may be very mundane, but you know what? That's a group of kids and parents that want to have an activity, and they're coming forward and they say they want to do it.
Mhm.
So to me, it indicates things are thriving.
Mhm.
Not perfect, but thriving.
You made me just think of something. How do we track like the honor societies? Do they have accounts too that run through the district?
What do you say honor society?
Well, I mean, we're gonna be recognizing.
Yeah, so all those, yeah. Any organization they have officers, and yes, they do.
But they're not in this
But
report.
this extracurricular is a whole different thing.
Oh,
Are you
it's
saying that because it's a new?
No, I was thinking about it because we're going to see one, there's
Yeah,
one on
there's a difference
Thursday.
between honor societies and extracurricular under comptroller's regulations.
So where is it captured?
So each one of those advisor of the honor society keep track of, I mean, one honor societies typically don't, money that they get is money they spend it out. They get money to buy honor cords, and they buy honor cords and give them out. So it's not one of those where funds accumulate typically over time. It's typically in and out expenditures for those particular groups. And if something becomes something that we have to accumulate funds, more likely somebody's gonna drop into some kind of club at some point. So there could be some club association with things, but totally different pieces. Just like Senate has their own funds, and there's a whole account of Senate funds.
Okay, great, they're all accountable though.
Yeah, all accountable.
They're all accountable.
So
I'm
the best
sure.
piece of
I
it, if
just
you
didn't
look,
know where.
next time we do you probably wait till next October, right? When we do and you can probably go look at one of the audit reports, you'll see the whole category of anything that there's a funding of, it's in the audit report, either on the ECA or those other things like yearbook and all those other ways that we accumulate money we have to track for.
Okay.
Yeah.
All in favor? The motion passes. Okay. Number 4, BOCES purchases, IMS. Can I get a motion? Gus is first, Jason is second. Any comments? All in favor? Motion passes. Number 6, no, number 5, bids, custodial supplies and transportation bus parts. Can I get a motion? Todd is first, Bob is second. Any comments? All in favor? Motion passes. 6, contracts, IMS, Troxel Corp. Can I get a motion? Bob is first, Todd is second. Any comments?
No.
All in favor? Motion passes. Number 7, scholarships and local grant donations with gratitude. Okay, Jason is first, Gus is second. All in favor? All in favor? I was gonna say that. Motion passes. Number 8, adoption of the 22-23 school calendar that we saw last week. Can I get a motion? Naomi's first, Stacy is second. Any comments? All in favor? Motion passes.
Okay, playing tables.
Mrs. Mylod, acceptance of special ed placements.
Good evening. Any questions about the recommendations from the preschool and school age committees this evening?
Good, thank you. Thank you. Can I get a motion? Gus is first, Naomi is second, all in favor? Motion passes. Approval of staffing recommendations. I believe we have 2 retirements tonight. Mrs. Bush.
Yes, good evening. We have Kim Carbocas, who's retired after 20 years as a special education aide, and Gordon Lonsberry is retired after 20 years as a bus driver in the transportation department.
Congratulations, Kim and Gordon, together 40 years. Fantastic. Can I get a motion? Naomi's first, Bob is second. All in favor? Motion passes. Second reading, policies and procedures, anything for Dr. Robinson?
AKA Becky Carr.
Can I get a motion? Todd's first, Bob is second. All in favor? Motion passes. Our second rendition of public comments. Do I have anybody in the public that would like to comment? If not, I have one that I will be reading. As soon as I get my face on the screen. All right. Written in from Mr. Peter Baudet. Recently, former FDA Commissioner Dr. Scott Gottlieb said cloth masks aren't going to provide a lot of protection. CNN medical analyst Dr. Leanna Wen said cloth masks are not appropriate for this pandemic and that they are little more than facial decorations. The CDC now recommends KN95 and N95 masks, essentially finally admitting that cloth and surgical masks are ineffective. This means the school district has been operating with ineffective masks this entire time. The good news is no one at the school was at high risk for severe illness since this past spring, and that it is still true today. Everyone has had a chance to get vaccinated at this point. The virus is now endemic and is milder, so why are most restrictions being placed on the lowest risk population? Does this make any sense? The mitigation plan from this summer was flawed at the time, and as it did not contain any risk assessments of the school's population, which is extremely low. But it is completely irrelevant now that the virus is endemic. Recently, media outlets have come out against mandatory masking in schools. This includes the New York Times, Washington Post, NPR, The Atlantic, the San Francisco Chronicle, and others. They have finally come around to our same conclusion, that the benefit of mandatory masking does not outweigh the risk. Kids' mental, social, and emotional health is critical, and a return to normal is urgent. A quote from a recent article can sum up the urgency. My, quote unquote, my 8-year-old son brought home a self-portrait this week. It had no nose or mouth, end quote. This is alarming. Some kids may be okay with masks, but not all of them are. Will you be requiring masks for next year's seasonal COVID wave? If the answer is yes, then you are arguing for the mask forever in schools because COVID is here to stay. If the answer is no, then there is no reason to not lift it now, as the conditions will be the same. Other states and countries have already returned to normal schooling. New York State is the anomaly. Guidance is not law and recommendations are not mandates. It is urgent to return to normal school to spare any more damage to kids. Anybody in the public coming up? No, I have nothing further. So we will move on to, for the good of the order, I would actually like to speak for a second. You know, and please do not misread what I'm about to say, but I don't think any of us wants to continue this way. None of us wants to be doing this. None of us. Nobody wants to wear a mask. But this is where we are right now. This is where we are right now. Will we be here forever? I don't believe so. Don't take that as we're taking off masks tomorrow, but I don't believe we'll be here forever. Or it may be very short term. I'm hoping. We are all hoping that. We're all optimistic. I'm going to read something because Shenendehowa operates not in a vacuum or a silo. There is not one of us around here that would like this to just totally end. Okay? So from here, from our association, I read, the state mask requirement appears likely to remain in place for the entire month of February, according to the scenario laid out in an order issued today by a state appellate court. A 3-judge plan has given the Attorney General's office a deadline of March 2nd to respond to arguments to be raised by 8 school districts on Long Island, all of whom have been granted permission to get involved in the lawsuit. If the state does not respond on or before March 2nd, the court states that it may end its stay on a lower court ruling that the health department lacked the authority to impose such a mandate. Meanwhile, the health department's administrative order is due to expire at the end of February. Parents challenged the legality of the mask mandate in a case called In the Matter of Michael, I'm going to butcher this, Dimitrio versus New York State Department of Health. Supporting the parents by filing papers with the court are the butcher this too, everybody from Long Island, I apologize. Connequot, Hauppauge, sorry guys, Island Trees, Lindenhurst, Locust Valley, Massapequa, Plain Edge, and Shoreham-Wading school districts. At this point, we here at Shenendehowa will continue the mask protocol. There is no change at this point. We will see as time goes on in the coming weeks and the coming months. With that, does anybody have anything else they'd like to discuss tonight? Okay, does anybody have a Shen shout? Oh, sorry.
It's not a Shen shout. It's just a question.
Yeah.
And a comment. I just wanted to say that I appreciated the public comments tonight. I thought, for the most part, they were a little bit less angry and more.
I agree. Wholeheartedly agree.
Yeah, and I particularly moved when I hear young people, because I have kids in high school, we all have kids, so. The point that I thought was really interesting, I have seen 4 or 5 articles myself from major newspapers talking about the move away from masks, and I do think eventually it's going to happen. I hope. I mean, I honestly hope. I thought it was interesting what one of the parents was saying about the teachers like freaking out and the other kids, and I do think we need to talk about how what's gonna happen when we get to that point. Like it's gonna, we have to, from the.
What our next phase is
what our
going to
next
look like.
phase is gonna
Mhm.
be. And make sure, that it's not just mass chaos
It's good for
when
us
it
to plan.
happens. Yeah, we
And
have to
be ready,
plan.
because,
Of course.
eventually, change is gonna come, and, I know we always plan stuff, but it's good that we, well in advance know how we're gonna handle stuff and communicate it so that, but,
Right, that we communicate it from the top down, and the teachers kind of know how to operate and what to expect, and I don't know if that's something we've thought about or can talk about, or.
So the answer is yes. And so it's so funny because a bunch of us today, superintendents, we were pontificating on that particular thing that Mrs. Stevenson just read that came out from NISBA. And so there's like a running joke that Friday at 5:30 is when we hear. And the problem that creates is there's no psychological or otherwise transition. And it just creates raw emotions right then. And then, and so one of the things that everyone's talking about is that whatever or whenever or whatever decision is made, there has to be, just even for people to do psychological transitioning is important. And we can't have, and again, so I'm putting out we can't have these decisions come where if someone decides, say if a superintendent is sick for a weekend and not in tune with media, they wake up Monday morning to an absolute storm within their place, and everybody pointing a finger, why didn't you know? Because information is released at 6:30, 7 o'clock on a Friday or on a Sunday, and people scrambling to say what does Monday look like, right? Because these conversations are too big to be reacting to, versus having, even just people having a transition time to say, okay, I know this is to come, whatever that is, how do I then start doing it? And then for, same way we did in the beginning of the school year, having people available to talk to kids and talk to people and trying to understand how people feel, how people think. So it's something that's definitely there. And like most of the things in COVID, there's no roadmap, right? There's no plan to say, always do it this way, it's gonna happen. But it's certainly one of those things that's there, and hopefully the next political fight won't be who's not supporting versus who's supporting enough versus, so that's a piece, that's a conversation people have, and saying that there needs to be a very measured approach to if or when the exit ramp occurs. Just like, think about a highway. You have a lane before you get off. You just don't come, it shouldn't happen like that, because there's a whole preparation piece, psychologically and otherwise, that needs to take place. So hopefully there's a turning lane before you actually hit the exit ramp, if that makes some sense. So that's a conversation that people are having now, because there's also a lot of conversation at all the levels about what does the future hold for COVID being formally declared an endemic. And I was just watching something the other day, the World Health Organization, the guy was this close. In fact, he was pressed and he kind of backed up, because he realized if he would have said it on that stage, it changed every conversation around the globe. So there's a lot of conversation. People are looking at that now, trying to understand how we look at the health implications and not necessarily the popularity and the political piece. And I'll separate the two pieces, right, in some of these decisions. So I hope there'll be a slight little ramp before we have to have the sharp departure off the highway, so to speak. So hopefully that answers your question, but yeah. And that was a very, very good point, because we saw that when that's why Kathy put a piece about people who went on COVID leaves. So we saw that, and so we had to recalibrate as a system when we know that so-and-so is not going to be available for, and it's not our place to judge a person's viewpoint or even mental tolerance or physical tolerance and otherwise emotional. It's not our place to judge that, right? It's how do we then accommodate that to keep provisions, vital within our system. And so I anticipate we're going to have some of that. I hope it won't be anything that's significant, but I think we're going to have some of that.
And regarding the COVID leaves, there's all of these people that we're talking about, they're coming back at some point.
Yeah, most people are back now, and some people decide because of other factors, be it family factors, decide, so yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, most of the situation, because people realize that, okay, it's not as, I hate to kind of characterize it, it's not as bad as I thought, kind of thing. And or with more vaccine, with more this, you know, so there's a higher degree of confidence, right? But you're still gonna have, I mean, we're gonna have parents potentially saying, I'm not sending my kid back. And I gotta tell you, the piece that there's gonna be a conversation is the capacity, and I'm not encouraging it in any ways, because I fundamentally believe that kids have a better experience in school than out of school. Fundamentally believe that. And quite frankly, we'll say that over and over again. Kids are better off in a school environment than not. And so will we have a handful of those situations? We have them now. And that's why you see, you know, people who homeschool, people who do these other options, they're going to say, other options exist if you make a choice. However, our responsibility is present the best choice for the learning experience. You have other personal factors that you may want to take into consideration, which we understand and respect, and also this is a responsibility for the system to provide a quality experience for kids. Even the kids who commented tonight, I know a couple of kids, they're involved, they're doing stuff in school. And so it don't translate to I don't like that to I'm not glad I'm still doing stuff in school and had a chance to come to school, right? And so those are the other side of the coin. And yeah, and I think we'll watch to see how things play out, watch the natural evolution, if you will, over the course of, like to Mr. Stevenson's point, next week's month, who knows? And hopefully again, that we have a little off-ramp and not have the sharp, you know, turn kind of thing.
Like the parkways in New York City.
Yeah, they run up on you fast and you miss them, you gotta stay on until the next loop. So yes.
Yeah, and the only other thought I just wanted to say is that, you know, we looked at and we heard how, you know, Shenendehowa had not reacted to other superintendents and other school districts and other BOCES regions, not the one that Shenendehowa belongs to. But the message and the letters that they signed were the same fundamental thoughts that we have all been having the whole time, asking Albany on give us processes and procedures that make sense. That makes sense. So we're all after the same data, we're all after the same result. Just gotta get there. So, with that, can I have a motion to adjourn? Gus is first, Bob is second, all in favor?